Hello, fellow Earthlings! Let me welcome you to the first episode of what I hope to be a recurring series on this channel, where instead of doing my usual retrospective video essays on sci-fi classic films, I will offer more traditional reviews of classic sci-fi television. No in-depth, behind-the-scenes stories or anything like that, just my relatively unfiltered thoughts about the episode I just watched. Unfortunately, since I'm a little OCD in my media habits and my brain has an annoying tendency to make me a completionist, that means I will be going episode by episode, reviewing entire seasons at a time. For the first season of this show, I'm going to talk about the first season of The Outer Limits, a show that it might surprise you to learn I'm not all that familiar with. I grew up on the Twilight Zone, and I thought The Outer Limits was kind of like classic sci-fi's GoBots to the Twilight Zone's Transformers. Of course, I was completely wrong about that. I know that now. So let these reviews be my penance. So let's get to it, shall we?
Hit me.
The Outer Limits.
The Galaxy Being is the premiere episode of The Outer Limits, originally airing in September of 1962. Our story begins with Alan Maxwell, a science enthusiast and engineer at KXKVI Radio. He's been playing around with station equipment on company time, and his wife is getting increasingly annoyed with him. Even though Alan gives a surprisingly poignant speech about the benefits of an everyday man exploring the mysteries of the universe, she doesn't understand his hobby, treating it like a waste of time that will ruin his life. As a married YouTuber, podcaster, and writer, that doesn't sound familiar to me at all. While toying with the station's power supply and transmission tower, Alan receives a signal from outer space. And just like Jodie Foster, he immediately realizes he needs to plug it into a television set in order to understand it properly. However, a regular old cathode ray tube won't do, so he whips up a 3D television instead. As you do. And before long, he makes contact with a being from Andromeda, which is a solar system rather than another galaxy because people in the 1960s were dumb. After setting up a binary text-to-speech and speech-to-text system, which was totally a thing back then, they get to talking. Alan does what anybody would do and immediately launches into a discussion of death, politics, and religion, while the alien being is more curious about Alan's mouth hole.
Communication.
Is that why mouth hole moving?
Alas, their conversation is cut short when Alan's increasingly agitated wife reminds him that he has to go and receive an annoying award from the mayor at a big event in his honor. So inconvenient. And so Alan puts his new acquaintance on hold, tells the relief radio guy not to mess with the power levels, even though it would be totally awesome if he cranked them to the max, and then leaves to be an important member of the community. As soon as he's gone, surprise surprise, the new radio guy does exactly what he was told not to do, and this causes chaos in the power station, where the alien physically materializes. After getting a dose of good old American hospitality, the alien starts just completely wrecking everything and everybody he comes into contact with as he searches for Alan. They do find each other, Alan's wife passes out, and then the three of them go back to the power station, followed by the United States military. Because that's just what happens when aliens show up. The wife tries to tell them everything's alright, but before she can even get a word out, she becomes the victim of more American hospitality. The alien, in true classic sci-fi fashion, heals her mortal wound, tells everyone to go home and think about what they've done, and then disappears forever. But not before destroying the radio tower and proving to Alan that his wife was right all along. I really enjoyed this episode. Sure, it's kind of a mishmash of 1950s sci-fi tropes, but it's still a smart little yarn that manages to feel unique, helped by the visual design of the creature and the earnest acting of Cliff Robertson. Not to mention the hook of using radio to detect alien life, a relatively new idea at the time. The effects actually benefit from their cheapness, where even the flaws in matching the movements of the creature to the movement of the background lend an extra layer of strangeness to everything. Granted, it's a bit overlong, but as the introduction to a television series, it certainly leaves an impression. And that's all I have to say about the Galaxy Being. Now, as always, do those YouTubey things and check out my Patreon and all that stuff. But until next time, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
This is Eddie Phillips, booming out at you from here to Canada and east to the Mississippi. Keep your set tuned on. Listen to how it soups up.